Our next speaker I wanted to introduce to you is Shelly Bischoff. Shelly is an Occ Health nurse and the founder and director of Ptolemy & Associates, an Occ Health Consulting firm based in Calgary. She has specialized her practice in occupational health and psychological health and safety in the workplace for over 27 years. She is passionate about collaborating with organizations who want to make a difference in the health and well-being of their employees. And she's going to be kicking off the rest of this afternoon, later this morning, this afternoon, a little bit of a focus on psychological health and safety. Shelly will be talking about the impact of assumptions, bias, and perceptions in workplace psychological health and safety. Please join me in welcoming Shelly to the stage.
Yay. Okay, am I on? Oh yeah. You guys are so good back there in the corner. So, how are you? How often do we ask people how they are? And we do it in the hallway, just in passing. Sometimes we don't even stop to see if somebody actually responded. We just say, hey, how are you? And we keep going. But today I want to talk a little bit about some of the measures we can take individually and as teams and as leaders in order to build psychological safety. So for the purposes of my practice, I consider psychological health centric to an individual and psychological safety centric to an organization. Does that make sense? So I consider psychological safety an enabler. So what I mean by that is it's not going to produce high-performing teams, but it's going to set the stage for high-performing teams to occur. Diversity and inclusion can only live when psychological safety exists. Curiosity and empathy are two key components that we're going to discuss today and are near and dear to my heart. And Bill Gentry, who's an organizational psychologist, has an ask for us. He asks us to flip the script, okay? So I got a new knee. It's pretty cool. It's titanium alloy, and it matches the one on my right side and the one on my shoulder. So when I go to the airport, about 50 yards from me getting to security, you know, every tone, every pager, everything goes off. It's like a warning system. And so I had my knee replacement surgery in August. So I'm going to walk and I'm going to sit. Is that okay with you? Just sort of whatever. Okay, sounds really good. Can I tell you how excited I am with that swag bag? Okay, here's the dealio. I love the socks. And when I get home, I'm going to fight my husband for them. Because he'll say they're kind of like maybe for men. I'm like, no, it's my swag bag, right? I was speaking with Tom from DriverCheck. It's like a reunion. I haven't seen DriverCheck in a long time, face to face. Amazing people, really good service. And to meet you and to see some of you that I already know, wow, it's a pleasure. So I talked about that premise being that psychological safety is an enabler and that curiosity and empathy are required. And that for me, psychological safety is centric to an organization. Because I feel like when we talk about occupational health and safety, we've always got like a really large S, bolded, capitalized, and a small h, right? So where is the juxtaposition between the health in OHS and the safety when it comes to psychological beings? And by the way, beings, we are feeling beings who think, not the other way around, right? And that's really important. So my approach in the workplace is a bit different. I want to talk to you about the impact of psychological safety, right? I want us to do that, but I'd really like to spend some good time talking about facilitation rather than teaching, rather than telling, rather than imparting knowledge. Because that's where I've found the most success when I'm working with leadership teams and in employee groups, okay? And I want us today to think actively about the role that each and every one of us play in each and every interaction we have in the workplace. Because I could talk to you until I had no spit left, right? I could. Would that make a difference? Potentially. But what I've seen demonstrated over and over and over again is if I put you in scenarios, if I give you the scenario, if I provide an environment of safe space, and I give you the scenario, and I ask what you're feeling, what would you do, what wouldn't you do, how do you look at that with empathy? That's when you get to really, really get it, right? Psychological safety. So I consider you my team. You've been my team for 2 days. If I tell you that you are in a psychologically safe room, do you believe me? Cole says yeah. Jenny says yeah. Dave, do you believe me? He's like, she's pretty sketchy. I don't actually know if I should trust that woman. Now, I use the word trust purposely. Can you feel safe if you don't have trust first? Marina says no, you can't. You can't feel that safety unless you have that trust. So psychological safety means that you are safe here in our session today. Right now, you're safe. Psychological safety means that you belong here, that we belong together, and that we share a future together, in whatever context that is, right? Is there a value to storytelling in the workplace? I think we should own our own stories, our hard stories, our good stories. I think we should tell our stories because it helps people understand that you're coming from a place of authenticity when you're willing to tell your own stories. And I've got a couple of stories I'd like to share with you. But it's important for us to know when to be able to tell those stories, right? But I'm a charter professional in HR, so I'm really weird. I'm sure you all figured that out in the last day and a half. I'm a nurse. I'm a certified occupational health nurse, but I'm also a charter professional in HR. And I'm just finishing up my certification as a practitioner with the Fearless Organizations certification program. And I'm also someone who's been certified by the Canadian Mental Health Association as an advisor. And every time I take training, I think about this all the time. Psychological safety is not something that I can tell you to do. Does that make sense? I just can't tell you, can you go out and do some psychological safety? Ostensibly, employers do everything in their power to build mental health, to speak to psychological safety. Right? And they feel it works, but the opposite is often true. It's only purportedly working. It's not actually working. What is it that we're not doing well? So first thing I want you to do is just throw out everything you think. And you know, when we say don't believe everything you think, I shouldn't believe everything I think, it's counterintuitive because I do trust myself. But should I? Not always. Not always. What I should do is question myself, pause and reflect. What the heck is going on right now? Am I thinking through assumptions? Is there a bias filter? Do I perceive something that's happening that's not real, but based on a previous experience? Does that make sense? We might not know what we're really thinking in terms of the whole story. if I could just get you to leave with a couple of things. One of them is to go from implicit to explicit. Let's not imply psychological safety. We've done that for a millennium. We're going to have to get real. And we're going to have to say it and demonstrate it actually. And we're going to have to go from that unconscious state of mind in the workplace, which is where we live a lot of that time. I mean, I like JD's term, pandemic pause. I'm stealing it and taking it west. Just going to tell you right now. It's Coolio. Pandemic pause. Hell on earth for most of us in this room that have had to deal with it in the workplace, right? And so when I think about our ability to function in that kind of an environment, it's scary. I worked on the COVID team at Calgary Police Services as their occupational health officer for just over 2 years, managing the COVID op. And I can tell you unequivocally, it was the worst experience of my entire life. Gratifying, because you're trying to help them. But you know, what we hire for in enforcement is type A personalities, so you can imagine what they were like to deal with. And they had guns or something, some sort of, you know, force equipment. So I want you to think about going from that unconscious state into a conscious state in the workplace. So I get to work with phenomenal leaders. Right now I'm working with a large first responder organization in Alberta who has had 3 sexual harassment claims. I met them in May when the HR director phoned and said, please, for the love of God, get in your car. And I said, whoa, what is the scope of work? What's happening? What would you like me to do? I need you to do 2 things. I need you to try and help these leaders, so the leadership group in that service, try and deal with the psychological impact of having these 3 harassment complaints, which were all over the media every day. And number 2, I need you to help us, the people who lead those people, as the leadership group. And when I went in there, I saw a lot of unconscious behavior and attitudes. Is that a survival mechanism? For sure. Who wants to be conscious? Like, really? Depending on the situation, I'm being really, I mean, okay, so I'm somewhat facetious, but who really wants to be conscious in a situation like that? And you're the leadership team responsible for all those employees, 3 of which have claimed sexual harassment, right? So at the bottom of some of the slides, there's a facilitation comment. And so what I have found the magic to live in is my facilitation. So when I go into a group like that, I don't tell them what to do, how to think. I actually facilitate them helping themselves and having some self-awareness and building a structure of understanding for themselves as a team. And so I help them to go from implicit to explicit and from unconscious to conscious. So in that case, I use a facilitation activity where we, as a team, after we set some ground rules, right, which we call the terms of engagement, so the structure, the construct of working with that leadership group has to be founded before any work can be done. Because if I tell that leadership group that I'm there and that they're safe, after what they've gone through, they don't feel safe. So we have to build a construct, right, of our work together. And so I want to talk to us a little bit about assumptions. Anyone made assumption today? Anyone made an assumption about me over the last day and a half? Do you think I have a permanent disability? Do you think I have a temporary disability? What do you think? What kind of assumptions do you make? And how fast do you make them? Do you make them when you see me or the cane? Come on. There's 2 sides of silence that are fundamental to my practice in psychological safety, fundamental. And so right now we're going to have silence and allow you to process and maybe offer up your thoughts. Do you make an assumption based on seeing me walk or seeing the cane or both? What do you think? You think both? Yeah. How fast do you make it? Yeah, instantly. And I feel bad because I'm going to be fine, and it's a replacement issue, and you just part the seas for me. Like the whole sea just parts, right? You're very accommodating, you're fussing. I can't believe I haven't taken one of you out with that cane. This morning I was having breakfast and I had a nice young fellow behind me. That's an assumption, he might not be young. Do you see what just happened there? And my cane got stuck on a cord underneath the table by the fruit and the croissants. And so I'm like, oh, for the love of God, I'm going to end up killing somebody in here. Our assumptions are immediate. And they're based on who we are and how we lived on our childhood, our beliefs, our opinions, our experience, our thoughts. Here's some common ones in the workplace. People are looking for a way out. Does that make sense? Sometimes I'm sitting with a group of leaders, and if we have a good construct in terms of our terms of engagement, they'll actually say, well, to be honest with you, Shelly, I don't know if they really want to do better. I'm not sure they want to work with me. Is it possible that the team doesn't want to work with a leader? Totally. Absolutely. So sometimes that leader is the one that feels on the out. Does that make sense? They feel they're ostracized. So they make assumptions that people don't have the right intent, that collaboration is an individual problem or issue. Is collaboration an individually focused problem? Or is it a team concept? Oh, you've all gone to sleep. What time is it? Yeah, I mean, I think as individuals, we can collaborate. But unless we feel included, inclusivity, unless we feel that our diversity is recognized and accepted, unless we feel trusted and safe, we're not going to collaborate, right? Another assumption is that vulnerability is risky. Is vulnerability risky? Talk to me about that. Give me, why do you think that? Nice. The trust. Yeah, absolutely. Here's what we know. Vulnerability has to happen. And vulnerability won't happen unless that actual safety exists. And we have to lean into being vulnerable. It's courage over comfort. Courage over comfort. Right? Those are words I use every day. And I can't say those words initially when I'm dealing with leadership groups. Most leadership groups that I'm dealing with are people in trouble. Something has happened. There's some sort of crisis. There's some sort of chaos. So we have to help them understand that it's okay and safe for them to lean into vulnerability with their team. How do you do that? Can a leader say they don't know what's going to happen? Should a leader tell a team they don't know what's going to happen? I believe they should. And I believe they could if they actually felt that being vulnerable in the moment was okay and not going to ostracize them, right? Psychological safety takes too much time, or it implies friendship and always playing nice together, and that there's no boundaries, that there's no accountability, right? But psychological safety doesn't take more time. It actually sets the stage to have really, really good collaboration, creativity, and high-performing team development. Inclusion precedes trust. That's an assumption. You will not have, I do lots of inclusion and diversity training. And when I say training, I don't go in and tell people what it is. I go in and put them in the moment of the scenarios and ask them to feel it and to be able to work together to decide what to do in that situation. You can tell them all you want. Study after study shows that mandatory diversity and inclusion training does not give you the outcome that you want because of how it's presented, by how it's given. And so when my facilitation strategy, when I'm trying to deal with assumptions, is to have a reflection activity where people think about some of the assumptions. And so I put them into a situation as a team and as individuals. Some of that information is anonymous, confidential, and some of it the team works together on. It's amazing when you see the light go off. A bias. What is a bias? It's prior experience with something. It's based on how we think and feel from something that triggers a prior experience, and it throws us into leaning more into a bias trap. And a bias trap is only a set of circumstances that would actually be conducive to actually pushing us into the bias. So one way is information overload. So if we're dealing with a lot of information, too much information, we're inundated with it, then we're going to have trouble removing the bias, right? If we're looking at feeling over fact, have you ever done interviews or seen a person, a new person on a team? I'm going to have to sit down before I fall right over there. So have you ever conducted an interview and your feeling about a candidate or a new team member is good? Feel good. They're good. And you say to me, that's a good fit for us. That's a great fit for us. Every alarm goes off with me because it's a likability issue, and now you've got bias. Something that they're wearing, some way they spoke to you, how they looked, how they responded, their ethnicity, their gender, their age, something spoke to you, and maybe more than one thing, and you go into that affinity bias. You're like, hey, whoa, Sue, look at her. Freaking amazing. She's a good fit. But is she? I don't know. Got to be careful, right? Feelings over fact. And then the other one is a need for speed. When we're in a hurry. Anyone had to go through a lot of resumes in a hurry? Like you're just choking on them. Like your head is just swimming. What do you, when you're in a hurry and you're going through a series of resumes, what do you look at first? Someone tell me, what do you look at first? Nice. Experience. Education. So if those people that you're in a hurry to look at are only being selected for shortlisting based on experience or maybe education, you might be missing the most competent individual. Does that make sense? It's a human nature thing. It's a need for speed. Like I have HR colleagues that are going through hundreds of resumes. So the need for speed. What I want to just leave you with is that biases can be really self-limiting, not only for the individuals that we work with, but what about ourselves? Can bias be self-limiting to us? Is it possible for us to have a bias of ourselves? You know, I get the honor and the pleasure to work with lots of employees and leaders. And sometimes I sit down with them individually in a one-on-one session, and I immediately see that they have a bias, a self-limiting bias against themselves, right? So what I do is I have an activity where we fill in the gaps. So here's a proposition for you. The more I get to know Sue, the less room in my little tiny brain, and I mean it is pretty small, the less room in that peanut of my brain is there for assumptions. Does that make sense? The more I get to know Cole, the less opportunity I have for bias and assumptions and perceptions. So that's what we do. We run an activity with that group, with that leadership team, And we do fill in the gaps so that they can understand what that means. Have you ever looked at someone? Maybe you're looking at me and you're like, I don't like her. She's awful. She needs to go. I'm not going to work with her. She's unhinged. We're on the LRT, we're on the airplane, we're in a conference. You look at someone and you distinctly right away don't like them. What's that based on? Yeah. Social mind bugs, I love them. Love them. Mind bugs are based on us making a determination of someone based on their association with a particular social group. And it could be anything. It could be ethnicity, it could be age, it could be gender, it could be orientation, it could be disability. But they get into our head, they're in our head, and they work. So an example would be, I have service provided by someone who fixes my dishwasher. I mean, he said he knew what he was doing. No, let's make it a she, because we have a bias against that. We always have examples that we use he versus she. So it's a female technician, and she comes out, and she's going to fix my dishwasher. Lovely lady. Says she knows what she's doing. She fixes it. She leaves. I've got a flood by 6 o'clock in the evening. I'm pretty upset. I'm angry. And I actually attribute her inability to fix the dishwasher correctly based on her association with a certain group. She's too old. What the heck does she know about fixing a dishwasher? She looks like she's got 1 foot in retirement. Right away, the bugs start working. We don't have active awareness of these bugs. So again, over and over and over again, what I want you to think about is to reflect. And to reflect means to pause. And who has time for pause? But we have to be really careful, because that's what happens to us. Can leaders have social mind bugs dealing with their team? So I use the example of advanced age. Can it work alternatively to younger aged employees? Well, they have no idea what they're doing, right? Unless we tell them what they're doing, right? So it influences our behavior, and it's either to the members or to the entire social group. And it sometimes isn't seen until something forces it out. What's cognitive dissonance? It's me saying, I abhor gossip. Melissa Schneider and Adler and I go out for a beer ski. Lovely lady, by the way. She's a good ally drinking. She knows the half-life of that stuff, and I feel safe with her. She'll give me the big, yo, you're cut off. And we're sitting there, and we start gossiping about Shauna. Another amazing, lovely lady, but we're gossiping about her. I teach this. I am someone who really, really believes in absolutely removing gossip from the workplace. And that includes the pub with Melissa having a beer ski. And so here's what happens. I have like a mental conflict right now because I am doing something completely against my belief system. And this happens a lot. It'll happen maybe to you, but it happens to others. So if you're in a training setting and you're asking people about harassment, discrimination, diversity, and inclusion, they'll say, well, of course we should be good to everyone. No, we shouldn't do that. I would never do that. But the reality is that they are participating in that. Give me a reason why someone would participate. Yes, because we want to be approved. Nice, good work. So when I'm dealing with social mind bugs, I just need to do the exercise to actually talk about what they are, right? Talk about what they are. Perceptions. We are constantly attempting to influence others' opinions of us. Like right now, I really want you to like me and not throw some sort of object like an apple. You might. You could be reading the newspaper online for all I know. but I want you to like me. And I'm constantly making adjustments and considering how to present myself. What shoes should I wear? Do those earrings look a bit trashy? Like, what about my presentation? What about my new knee? Like, is this going to turn people off? I'm constantly trying to get your influence of me to be in the positive. Do we do that? Do you know how sad it is in the workplace when that's all an employee has the cognition to do all day? Because they're stressed, depressed, anxious. All they're doing is trying to fit in, right? So then, the leader says, well, they're not productive. Well, no. They just feel ostracized, isolated on the out. There's a cognitive gap between the expectations we have of ourselves and others. So people have expectations of us and we have them of them. And our perception ends up being different than what the expectations are. Are we good at really understanding? So here's an example. So a leader has an expectation that everyone use their voice, right? Everyone is on my team should feel welcome to use their voice. But their perception by everyone sitting in that room as a team member has the perception that that is not safe to do so. That is a clear sign you're throwing yourself out in front of a bus. There's a gap. And until we acknowledge the gap that does exist, we can't do anything about it. And do leaders want to acknowledge the gap? No, they want me to start my car and go home. Yeah, they don't, they're done. Yeah, we're done listening to you, right? So they're very deceiving. Because if you look at perception, have you heard this adage? Your perception is your reality. No, that's not right. Did you hear that? Now I'm bossy up here. I got a clicker and now I'm bossy. No. No, your reality is based on you knowing some part of the story, and you're working maybe from assumption and bias and information overload and a need for speed and feeling over fact, and you've just gone through the pandemic, which would shrivel anyone up. That was horrific. How many times do you think I should say that? Are you done listening to that? Self-awareness and reflection isn't something you can teach. You can only facilitate that. You can't tell someone to do it. And by the way, they don't want to. Virginia says we must not allow other people's limited perceptions to define us, but we actually allow that, and we actually allow our limited, or our perceptions of ourselves to limit ourselves, our own selves. Every day we're doing it, every day. I want you to go online. I hate this. Can I just tell you, I was so embarrassed. Here's some storytelling. I feel really good about myself when it comes to discrimination and bias and perception because I live in it every day, right? Don't write it down. You guys are going to get carpal. So we'll give you the notes, right? So I go on to the implicit association test site, right? This is a really great opportunity to test whether you have associations or disassociations with certain characteristics and traits. So I feel really good about it. I go on there and I do the white versus colored people, skin-colored people test. Here I am. Are you ready? Really? Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. We got no time. So I failed horribly. What I thought I felt in that implicit test is not true, right? But I did the implicit test between gay and straight people, and I've got a gay kid, and I scored really high. So this is based on previous experience, our beliefs, our opinions, right? So it's automatic preferences or non-preferences to people. In the workplace, everyone is calculating the interpersonal risk. It's a calculator. And what they're doing is they're looking at their impression management. When I meet you and I say, hey, it's good to meet you. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? You're going to choose what you tell me, right? Why? You're going to be careful about the words that you use. Why? Yeah, because we want people to feel good about us. So we are very selective right down to the word. It's called impression management. So a nurse is working with a doctor. She's watching a doctor work on a baby, and the doctor misses a medication. The nurse has a chance right now to calculate her interpersonal risk. She's either going to say something and worry about the immediate potential response, which is to get blasted by the doc, or discount the future potential for risk by not speaking up. Everyone in this room is calculating interpersonal risk in a conference setting because many of you don't know each other. The connection on safety. So what do I say to organizations who say, why do I still have fatalities? We have the most amazing health and safety management systems. Like, we've done the most training. Like, we are leading edge in this, and we still have fatalities. I'm going to say because people don't have the ability to speak up. For lots of different reasons. There's a power dynamic, right? Always power over. Always power over. So investigations shouldn't be called investigations. Blame shouldn't be the first thing we think about. Why can't we say it's not the nurse's fault, but it's a systemic issue related to the safety-sensitive nature of the industry for which we work in? No, we always have to have Joe Blow's name on it, because then we feel like someone is accountable. But then people won't speak up. Blame, shame, fear. So I really think that there needs to be a shift here with safety. And it needs to be psychological safety to help the physical safety of the individuals that work in the highest safety-sensitive industries and organizations. We come from a culture of telling. We come from a regulated system. We come from a system where we are silent for safety and that we have a fear of interpersonal risk. Our calculation of risk is too high. We will be quiet. But what we need to do is come from a culture of inquiry, appreciative, humble inquiry. To ask and be curious and get to know, right? That's where we need to go from. And we need to have a sense of contribution from these employees. We need to ask them, right? We need to ask them genuinely for their input. And we need to know that it's safe to speak up or to share and to have a desire to be part of the solution. Then we probably wouldn't have as many fatalities. We can be blind to the obvious, and we're also blind to our blindness. Belonging cues, subtle behaviors, and language. This belonging cues only happen from the inside of me out. They can't work the other way. You can't tell me I'm belonging. I can only feel belonging if I have the cues to help me feel that way. Subtle behaviors and language, actual shared orientation to the future. Clear, consistent, and connection cues, right? Verbal intelligence versus collective intelligence has been highly studied in teams. What I mean is that you could have a lot of high IQ individuals in a team environment, and when you work on studying how that team performs, it's the verbal, actual intelligence of the collective that's more important than the actual intellectual IQ that actually impacts the ability for that team to be high performing. And we need to reduce this interpersonal distance to the best of our abilities. We need to lean into vulnerability, talk to you about that, courage over comfort. We need to cultivate diverse perspectives. We have to be open to it. We have to, first of all, know that we should do it. Engage curiosity and empathy over and over and over again. These are drivers that work over and over and over. And we have to share our exchange, not have it one-sided. Positive failure. I was on LinkedIn last week and I saw a celebration party for failure in Calgary. I don't know if any of you gone, but I've done some failure celebrations in the workplace with leaders especially, because leaders have a thing about failure. They don't have it, it turns out. And so we actually, if we have safety, I have to assess that there's safety, psychological safety in that group, and that we have a construct that everyone agrees to. What happens is that we talk about the failure and we celebrate it, because if we're a learning organization and we want to have high-performing teams, don't we have to fail? If we want to have creativity and highly processed thinking and problem solving, don't we have to also be at risk for failure? Yeah, we have to think differently about failure, right? Should we not seek to learn and understand how someone might be thinking and feeling? There's an opportunity for the leader to flip the script. right? Cultivate the connections with curiosity. Lean into that experience, into that exposure. Think about power with and within and to rather than over, right, for a leader. Accept authentic contributions. Why do we always respect the contributions that an employee makes when they're based on our expectations? What if I come to the team and I contribute to your team in a way that you didn't expect? Can't you respect and celebrate my contributions anyway? You're like, nope, it's lunchtime, you're out. Rewarding others really, truly is the mantle of leadership. I don't even know, Sue, like, just shut me down. I need you to pause and reflect. I need you to move away from telling modes. Don't tell me, unless you're telling me a story, which I'm not going to be able to tell you my stories. It's really poopy. Oh, well. If you could enhance your ability to have situational awareness around you, it takes practice. So leaders and I practice it, employees and I practice it. I need you to have interest and curiosity. I don't care if you like him. I don't care if you want to work with her. You are working with him and you are working with her. And you need to work that out. Look at them differently. Adjust your expectations. I'm not talking about a lack of boundaries and no structure and no accountability. I'm talking about creating psychological safety and accepting us for who we are. Did you have everything today available to you in order to be safe? I ask leaders to ask this all the time. They're like, well, why would I ask that? It would sound like maybe we don't. No, actually, it's leaning into vulnerability and being real with employees. Here's my approach. And who says that any one approach is important or right? I over-communicate listening. I love silence. So with that team, that first responder team that's going through devastation, when I first met them, I just let the room speak. I said, I don't have to be here. I can go home. I will only stay if you invite me to stay. And it was really awkward. They all had red faces and they were really uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden, somebody spoke. But it was probably 6 minutes of silence, and I was like, oh my God, how long will this go? But what I need to do first is respect them from where they are, right at the point where they are, and they're scared. And I need to give them time for silence. Two sides of silence. When somebody knows something that could be dangerous to a life and they don't speak up, it's not safe to. Psychologically, it's not safe. Silence. When you give the gift of silence so people can reflect on what they want to say. Surface your assumptions. Suspend your assumptions. Empower yourself. Empower others. Be open to change. Curiosity fills the gaps, creates the connections. I want you every day to think about your team. What does support for you from me look like? We should be asking that every day. We don't have to say it verbally, we can show it, but you need to think about this. Psychological safety is the pathway to learning and high-performing teams. It's about empowerment. It's about empowering yourself and others, and I promise I'll stop. These are phenomenal. I read ferociously, and these books should be read. Again, I'm being bossy. I'm telling you what to do, but I'm not gonna mince words here. They are phenomenal, and they're not hard reads. And you have these epiphanies, right? And you're like, yeah, cool. I want to offer gratitude now. Gratitude to you for being with me and for listening to me and for being part of my team today. Thank you.